Hello, and welcome to Sword Drills of the Spirit. Today is day 213 of our journey together as we are reading through the Bible in a year. We are continuing on following the Discipleship Journal Bible reading plan. You can find a link for the plan in the description down below. It shows us that we're reading 4 different sections every day, 2 sections from the Old Testament and 2 sections from the New, so that we can have a little bit of variety in our reading. So at this stage, we got a little bit of prophecy, a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of gospel, and a little bit of the epistles. So in that way, we can stay engaged with the text. Before we start today, as usual, let's open up in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you. I thank you for your word. I thank you for the relationship that you have with us, that we can have a relationship with the creator of the universe, that our creator, who loves us and formed us and calls us to himself. That I thank you so much that this word that we're studying, this Bible, is a love letter from you to us, drawing us in, calling for us, a cry of frustration with how much your people fell away from you and turned away from you and rejected you, and how you kept calling out to them in love, and how that call of love culminated in the coming of Jesus. And so I thank you so much, Lord Jesus, for coming. I thank you for drawing us closer to the Father and drawing us closer to you. And I love that, and I thank you. I pray that you bless the reading of your word today. Let us see you in it and see that love for ourselves. In your holy name we pray. Amen. Amen. Okay, let's start. So in Isaiah chapters 34 through 36 today, Isaiah, of course, prophesying before the exile, during the Israelite exile from the Assyrians, and then before the Babylonian exile, but not quite during it. So we'll start here in chapter 34 and see where we come. Come here and listen, O nations of the earth. Let the world and everything in it hear my words. So pay attention. We're one of those nations. For the Lord is enraged against the nations. His fury is against all their armies. He will completely destroy them, dooming them to slaughter. Their dead will be left unburied, and the stench of rotting bodies will fill the land. The mountains will flow with their blood. The heavens above will melt away and disappear like a rolled-up scroll. The stars will fall from the sky like withered leaves from a grapevine or shriveled figs from a fig tree. I think about scenes like World War I and World War II, these where all the nations were bloodied and so many young men and other people, civilians, died in these great conflicts that served very little purpose. I think God is warning us that those things can happen and do happen throughout history time and again, and they can be so very, very devastating. And when my sword has finished its work in the heavens, it will fall upon Edom, the nation I have marked for destruction. The sword of the Lord is drenched with blood and covered with fat, with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of rams prepared for sacrifice. Yes, the Lord will offer a sacrifice in the city of Bozrah. He will make a mighty slaughter in Edom. Even men as strong as wild oxen will die, the young men alongside the veterans. The land will be soaked with blood and the soil enriched with fat. So here we see that even in these great wars, that the hand of God is in this, that a lot of these wars are judgments upon the nations. Think about the arrogance of Germany and Japan in World War II, and the terrible things they did in the battles. Not to say the Western nations weren't innocent of this, but they were definitely the leaders in this. And judgment came upon them, on those nations, and they suffered for decades after that and had to humble themselves to a very large degree in order to come back to modern prosperity. And we think of other nations like North Korea who didn't humble themselves, that cut themselves off and are now paying the consequences of that. Their people destitute and starving, while their leaders live in luxury. So a lot of this is judgment from God for a reason, out of love, to teach his people, the nations of the earth, lessons that they can learn from and grow from. Think of the Germany and the Japan that emerged from World War II a couple decades later, much stronger, much more humble, but still proud, in a national pride. But it comes on the heels of all this hard work they had to do to get from where they were to where they are, and they're much better off for it. Not that I'm saying they're better off for war, but God used war to develop them. Carrying on, verse 8. For it is the day of the Lord's revenge, the year when Edom will be paid back for all it did to Israel. The streams of Edom will be filled with burning pitch, and the ground will be covered with fire. This judgment on Edom will never end. The smoke of its burning will rise forever. The land will lie deserted from generation to generation. No one will live there anymore. It will be haunted by the desert owl and the screech owl, the great owl and the raven. For God will measure that land carefully. He will measure it for chaos and destruction. It will be called the land of nothing, and all its nobles will soon be gone. Thorns will overrun its palaces. Nettles and thistles will grow in its forts. The ruins will become a haunt for jackals and a home for owls. Desert animals will mingle there with hyenas, their howls filling the night. Wild goats will bleat at one another among the ruins, and night creatures will come there to rest. There the owl will make her nest and lay her eggs. She will hatch her young and cover them with her wings, and the buzzards will come, each one with its mate. Search the book of the Lord and see what he will do. Not one of these birds and animals will be missing, and none will lack a mate, for the Lord has promised this. His spirit will make it all come true. He has surveyed the divided the land and deeded it over to those creatures. They will possess it forever, from generation to generation. And so here, God is prophesying the complete destruction of Edom for all eternity. Not just being defeated, but being destroyed. There are many nations and cultures in this world that have just disappeared. Think of the Aztecs, or we think of several of the other ancient cultures and nations that we just have evidence for, but they're just gone. They're completely gone. And the reason for it is probably in part a judgment from God. We think about the Aztecs and the vast amounts of human sacrifice that they did. So I'm sure God was not happy with them. All right, chapter 35. Even the wilderness and desert will be glad in those days. The wasteland will rejoice and blossom with spring crocuses. Yes, there will be an overabundance of flowers and singing and joy. So it's continuing the story. It says, in those days, even the wilderness and desert will be glad in those days. So the natural world will be happy because of this destruction, because it cuts to overtake it and come back. The deserts will become as green as the mountains of Lebanon, as lovely as Mount Carmel or the plain of Sharon. There the Lord will display his glory, the splendor of our God. With this news, strengthen those who have tied hands, and encourage those who have weak knees. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong and do not fear, for your God is coming to destroy your enemies. He is coming to save you. And when he comes, he will open the eyes of the blind and unplug the ears of the deaf. The lame will leap like a deer, and those who cannot speak will sing for joy. Springs will gush forth in the wilderness, and streams will water the wasteland. The parched ground will become a pool, and springs of water will satisfy the thirsty land. Marsh grass and reeds and rushes will flourish, where desert jackals once lived. And a great road will go through that once deserted land. It will be named the Highway of Holiness. Evil-minded people will never travel on it. It will be only for those who walk in God's ways. Fools will never walk there. It's interesting. The Highway of Holiness. Lions will not lurk along its course, nor any other ferocious beasts. There will be no other dangers. Only the redeemed will walk on it. Those who have been ransomed by the Lord will return. They will enter Jerusalem singing, crowned with everlasting joy. Sorrow and mourning will disappear, and they will be filled with joy and gladness. I wonder when this comes to pass. I wonder if this is something that happened then, or something that is still to come. This idea of this highway of holiness, this where only the righteous will walk, only those that have been redeemed. Now we have been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb of Jesus Christ. Under the old Mosaic law, there was redemption under the sacrificial system, so I think that might still apply. So this doesn't necessarily have to be New Covenant language, but it could be. It's interesting. All right, chapter 36. Here we got a little bit of story in the middle of our prophecy. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign, King Sennacherib of Assyria came to attack the fortified towns of Judah and conquered them. So now we're putting into place exactly what he's going to talk about. Remember, Hezekiah was mostly a good king, a really good king. Then the king of Assyria sent his chief of staff from Lachish with a huge army to confront King Hezekiah in Jerusalem. The Assyrians took up position beside the aqueduct that feeds water into the upper pool, near the road leading to the field where cloth is washed. These are the officials who went out to meet with them: Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator; Shebna, the court secretary; and Joah, son of Asaph, the royal historian. Then the Assyrian king's chief of staff told them to give this message to Hezekiah. Now, I wonder, we're not going to double check, but this seems like it's pulled straight from Chronicles because I remember this story. This is what the great king of Assyria says. What are you trusting in that makes you so confident? Do you think that mere words can substitute for military skill and strength? Who are you counting on that you have rebelled against me? On Egypt? If you lean on Egypt, it will be like a reed that splinters beneath your weight and pierces your hand. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, is completely unreliable. But perhaps you will say to me, we are trusting in the Lord our God. But isn't he the one who was insulted by Hezekiah? Didn't Hezekiah tear down his shrines and altars and make everyone in Judah and Jerusalem worship only at the altar here in Jerusalem? I'll tell you what, strike a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria, and I will give you 2,000 horses if you can find that many men to ride them. With your tiny army, how can you think of challenging even the weakest contingent of my master's troops, even with the help of Egypt's chariots and charioteers? What's more, do you think we have invaded your land without the Lord's direction? The Lord himself told us, attack this land and destroy it. Oh, so remember, Israel turned to Egypt to buy mercenaries, chariots and charioteers, and the Lord wasn't too happy with them for that because they relied on man instead of God. Then Eliakim, Shebna, and Joah said to the Assyrian chief of staff, please speak to us in Aramaic, for we understand it well. Don't speak in Hebrew, for the people on the wall will hear. But Sennacherib's chief of staff replied, do you think my master sent this message only to you and your master? He wants all the people to hear it. For when we put this city under siege, they will suffer along with you. They will be so hungry and thirsty that they will eat their own dung and drink their own urine. Then the chief of staff stood and shouted in Hebrew to the people on the wall, listen to this message from the great king of Assyria. This is what the king says. Don't let Hezekiah deceive you. He will never be able to rescue you. Don't let him fool you into trusting in the Lord by saying, the Lord will surely rescue us. This city will never fall into the hands of the Assyrian king. Don't listen to Hezekiah. These are the terms the king of Assyria is offering. Make peace with me, open the gates and come out. Then each of you can continue eating from your own grapevine and fig tree and drinking from your own well. Then I will arrange to take you to another land like this one, a land of grain and new wine, bread and vineyards. Don't let Hezekiah mislead you by saying the Lord will rescue us. Have the gods of any other nations ever saved their people from the king of Assyria? What happened to the gods of Hamath and Arpad? What about the gods of Shepharvaim? Did any gods rescue Samaria from my power? What god of any nation has ever been able to save its people from my power? So what makes you think that the Lord can rescue Jerusalem from me? But the people were silent and did not utter a word because Hezekiah had commanded them, do not answer him. Then Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, the palace administrator, Shebna, the court secretary, and Joah, son of Asaph, the royal historian, went back to Hezekiah. They tore their clothes in despair, and they went in to see the king and told him what the Assyrian chief of staff had said. All right. So this is, I'm not sure how much of a copy and paste or how close it is to Chronicles or even Kings, but this story we've read at least twice before. But we're getting another perspective here, I'm pretty sure, in a bit, where Isaiah is definitely involved in this story. I remember Isaiah being mentioned, at very least, in Chronicles, so we'll see where this goes tomorrow when we jump into chapter 37. but we're just going to pause there and continue with it tomorrow. For now, we're going to go over to our books of wisdom, the book of Proverbs, chapter 24, verses 23 to 34. All right. So, these are going to be some like extra sayings from Solomon. Just to jump on the end here, it says, "Here are some further sayings of the wise. It is wrong to show favoritism when passing judgment. A judge who says to the wicked, 'You are innocent,' will be cursed by many people and denounced by the nations. But it will go well for those who convict the guilty. Rich blessings will be showered on them. An honest answer is like a kiss of friendship." Now remember, an honest answer is not always a nice answer. It's not always a comfortable answer. But an honest answer is a true answer. It's true friendship of a friend who tells you things honestly. Do your planning and prepare your fields before building your house. Don't testify against your neighbors without cause. Don't lie about them. And don't say, "Now I can pick them back. I can pay them back for what they've done to me. I'll get even with them." So when it comes time to testify against the people around you, especially your enemies, be honest. Don't think this is my opportunity to get them in trouble, for that is even worse, and that is a sin on your own head. I walked by the field of a lazy person, the vineyard of one with no common sense. I saw that it was overgrown with nettles, it was covered with weeds, and its walls were broken down. Then, as I looked and thought about it, I learned this lesson. A little extra sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Then poverty will pounce on you like a bandit. Scarcity will attack you like an armed robber. This little section is unique in that it talked about a situation and that the wise person saw and what he learned from it. I remember this proverb. I hadn't heard it before, and then at my wedding, my father read it out to us as a bit of wisdom to pass down to the generations, and I've never forgotten it. This idea that a little extra sleep, a little more slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will catch up to you. So the idea of always be willing to work, never be lazy, never put rest too far ahead of hard work and success. All right, so that stuck with me. Which of these proverbs have stuck with you? Which ones have been lodged in your brain for a long time since the first time you heard them and have directed the steps of your life? That's a really good question, because they will stick with you. We're reading them all. There's going to be 2 or 3, maybe some of the repeated ones, that are going to actually help you out in your life. You'll think of them when you come to decisions that you have to make or choices that you make along the way. You'll find yourself making a choice and then realizing, oh, I'm following the wisdom that I learned in Proverbs. That's why the Lord preserved it for us. All right, let's flip over into our Gospel of Luke, chapter 22, verses 63 through 71. This is a long chapter. It's just a continual story about what happened to Jesus, which is important, but I feel they could have broken it up a little more, because we're at verse 71 here by the time we're done. Okay, 63. Okay, so Peter has just denied Jesus, and he flees the courtyard where he was waiting to see what happened to Jesus, flees it weeping bitterly. So now we're going to shift our gaze to what's been happening to Jesus at this time. The guards in charge of Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and said, "Prophesy to us, who hit you that time?" And they hurled all sorts of terrible insults at him. At daybreak, he was arrested in the evening. He spends all night being beaten and assaulted by the guards. And now it's morning time. So all the priests and religious leaders have gotten up and are ready to do their evil work. At daybreak, all the elders of the people assembled, including the leading priests and the teachers of religious law. Jesus was led before this high council, and they said, "Tell us, are you the Messiah?" But he replied, If I tell you, you won't believe me. And if I ask you a question, you won't answer. But from now on, the Son of Man will be seated in the place of power at God's right hand." They all shouted, "So are you claiming to be the Son of God?" And he replied, "You say that I am." "Why do we need any other witnesses?" they said. "We ourselves heard him say it." So this is really, really interesting. He doesn't say he's the Son of God. He says he's the Son of Man. And he says the Son of Man will be seated in the place of power at God's right hand. Interestingly, these ancient Jewish scholars and leaders and priests assume and draw from that conclusion that he is saying he is the Son of God. So they have already an idea of the concept of the Son of God. This is not something that's new to them. I've heard a lot of people say that the idea that that there is a Son of God is so un-Jewish, it's ridiculous. And here we have Jewish leaders reaching that conclusion on their own. Because he says Son of Man, not Son of God. And they say Son of God. And interestingly, Jesus doesn't outright say, "I am God's Son," or "I am the Messiah." Though he says, "If I told you, you wouldn't believe me." So if he said, "I'm not the Messiah," I'm sure they would believe him. So it's clear that he would be saying he is the Messiah. So he kind of says it without saying it. And then they say, "Are you saying you're the Son of God?" And he says, "You said it, not me." No matter how he says that, he's acknowledging the truth of it. Jesus says he is the Son of God before the Jewish council, and this is why they kill him. They kill him for blasphemy. They don't believe him. And if they were right, they would be right in the execution. It would be blasphemy, and it would, according to God's law, be an execution, a death penalty offense. But he's right. He's telling the truth, and as such, they are committing a horrible sin and a great crime in convicting him and murdering him for this. They have murdered the Son of God. And I've heard some people blame the Jewish people for that. That's not what that means. It means that yes, these people murdered the Son of God, but they're a representative of all people. They're a representative of us as well, the Gentiles. They're a representative of all the people of earth. We have rejected God, but he hasn't rejected us. He is faithful when we are unfaithful, and we reject him in little ways every day. When we sin or when we turn away from him, we have been rejecting him over and over again all our lives, but he is faithful and remains faithful that he calls us back every time. All right. We have this moment in here in which they are convinced that he needs to die. So their next step is going to be to take him to the Romans, because under Roman law and under Roman occupation, the local judicial systems can't execute anyone without Roman consent. And so they've determined they want to kill him, but they can't do it without Roman permission. So they'll take him to Pilate, the Roman governor, next. So we'll read about that tomorrow. For now, let's go to our last section in Hebrews chapter 8, verses 1 through 6. So we've been talking about Melchizedek and how Jesus is a priest in the order of Melchizedek because he is both high priest and king. But he's better than Melchizedek because he is eternal as both high priest and king, and he is flawless. He is pure and holy and unblemished by sin, and so he doesn't have to offer sacrifices for his own sin to purify himself in order to approach the throne of God on our behalf. He is at the throne of God. He is on the throne of God. He is the perfect intermediary for us, between us and God, and that's amazing. So let's hear more about Jesus' position as high priest and what that means. Chapter 8. Here's the main point. So he's been making points all along. This is a long essay, it seems. Here's the main point. We have a high priest who sat down in the place of honor beside the throne of the majestic God in heaven. We just read that. Jesus said, the Son of Man will be seated in the place of honor at God's right hand. So he's pulling from that, and he says, we have a high priest who sat down in the place of honor beside the throne of the majestic God in heaven. There he ministers in the heavenly tabernacle, the true place of worship that was built by the Lord and not by human hands. Just check. There's a note here on tabernacle. Tent. So the heavenly tent. So heavenly tent or tabernacle. So tabernacle made by God, not by man. And since every high priest is required to offer gifts and sacrifices, our high priest must make an offering too. If he were here on earth, he would not even be a priest, since there already are priests who offer the gifts required by the law. They serve in a system of worship that is only a copy, a shadow of the real one in heaven. For when Moses was getting ready to build the tabernacle, God gave him this warning: "Be sure that you make it everything according to the pattern I have shown you here on the mountain." But now, Jesus, our high priest, has been given a ministry that is far superior to the old priesthood, for he is the one who mediates for us a far better covenant with God, based on better promises. I don't want to stop at 6. This gets good. All right. The point is this. When God spoke to Moses and gave him directions on how to create the tabernacle, he was super specific about dimensions and layout and objects that need to be in the temple and procedures for sacrifices. Like, everything is down to the letter. We read it all. We suffered through Leviticus and Deuteronomy. And not suffered, but it's a lot of repetition and a lot of details on how to do things. It was not the easiest thing to read or listen to, but it was important because of this. All those very specific details are reflections of something spiritually true, something heavenly. The writer of Hebrews is saying Jesus is now the perfect high priest in that perfect tabernacle, ministering before God the Father on our behalf in a perfect way. And it says that he has to bring a gift. They haven't talked about it yet, but I'm assuming the gift is himself and his sacrifice. But it's really, really cool to see this thing, this earthly tabernacle, be redeemed into its holy, true form in heaven. And now we no longer need that tabernacle. And now Jesus negotiates or mediates for us a far better covenant with God. We have a new covenant. We are not holden to the old laws of the Old Testament under the Mosaic or Davidic covenants. Those no longer apply. They have been fulfilled and completed, and they are whole with the coming of Jesus and what he did on the cross. And now Jesus mediates for us a new covenant under his blood. And now we are ready to live and breathe and serve under that new covenant. And that's what we've been reading about in the New Testament, and we'll continue to read for it. And he's going to describe it and explain it in more detail here. All right. We're going to stop there. I really didn't want to stop reading. It's good stuff coming, and I want to learn more about this new covenant. And so the writer of Hebrews is going to help us do that. I think Hebrews is one of my favorite books so far this time through the Bible. This really gets my logical brain going, oh, this makes sense. So I'm excited to see the rest of it. All right. We'll leave it at that. Let me know what you think. Which has really caught your brain here? Which proverb, of course, has been lifelong application for you? Drop that in the comments section. Share it with us so that we can encourage one another and see how the Bible has affected us and helped us grow and focus our lives. And any other thoughts in any other sections, we'll take those too and discuss them there. In the meantime, stay strong. Thank you for sticking with us. I hope you are as encouraged as I am. We will see all of you again tomorrow. God bless.